the Cassia rework. Is it any good though? That's the question I want to dive into in this particular video. Obviously I did 3 videos looking at 3 different builds from this very surprising Cassia rework when it first came out straight onto live servers alongside an also surprising Tracer rework. But with some time for it to sink in and with some time to gather statistics from actual ranked games, how is it shaping up? And then also on top of not only its balance performance in terms of how good it's doing right now, how well it's doing, how do I think the rework actually pans out, even if we imagine another couple of weeks down the line when there have been a couple of balance patches maybe and things are looking, well, let's say a little bit better. And well, that's probably a pretty ominous way of starting it, isn't it? If we're talking about things getting better, it must mean that things are pretty bad right now. Let me bring you here to this page. This is the just global hero win rate across all ranked play in Heroes of the Storm at the moment, in the last couple of weeks. So you can see, for example, Rexar's top at 57%, and then we've got a couple of heroes around 55-ish, then it kind of drops off 52, we're coming to 50s, and we'll go all the way down to 45. Well, where's Cassia? Well, you know, let's zip all the way down. We can see down here, really at the bottom end, you know, 46, down to 44, and then suddenly in the last 2 places, oof, big oof for these last 2 places. We've got Cassia and Genji. I mean, the good news for Cassia and for Cassia fans is that she is actually almost 2% win rate ahead of Genji. So that's good. She also happens to be the second worst win rate hero in ranked in the entire game, by almost 5% lower than the next worst hero though, Hanzo. So you can tell from that she's in a pretty bad state overall. We can break this down a bit as well and look at some of her specific talents. I think tier 1 is actually quite interesting because there's obviously, you know, looking at win rate, there's obviously a standout here, isn't there? Which is Impale is way ahead of the rest. Impale increases Fenn's cast range and area of effect by 20%, and it does 50% more damage to enemies below 50% health. Now, I think the big deal that makes this actually good is that the other ones are quite underwhelming. So this is 25 more damage on Lightning Fury. Gives you a bit of avoidance when you cast it, and it also increases the damage by 1 every time it hits a hero, so it's quite a low damage addition to her Q, but it's something. And then you've got Charge Strikes, which is attack speed and every 3rd basic attack bouncing. I'll come back to her basic attack build in a second. I think that this though does stand out. Not only is it giving you a massive chunk of extra damage on Fend, quite easy to proc as well on enemies below 50% health, but the extra cast range makes it much easier to use, and the extra area of effect makes it more consistent to hit. I just think this talent does a lot of things. I feel like it's kind of a tuning issue where this one is probably a bit too weak, and her basic attacks are clearly way too weak. We look at the other talent tiers, certainly at this first half of the talent tree. All relatively low win rates, all relatively low. Seraph's Hymn does stand out as being weak. Basic attacks giving you back mana. Quite awkward, and reducing the cooldown of Blinding Light, quite awkward. I'm going to talk about Blinding Light in a second, but just bear this one in mind. Now, what I want to touch on is there's clearly a problem though with Cassia's basic attacks. Looking here at level 13, not, well, I mean, bad. Bad, but not as bad. Now, the weakest one at 13 though, Gloves of Alacrity, which is boosting her basic attack range by 1, and then an additional 1 when avoidance is fully charged. That's a significant buff, but it's performing really terribly. If we look over here, we have Martial Law is doing okay. Power Strike is doing even worse, which is understandable. If you hit 3 heroes 3 times in 15 seconds with your Q ability, it will cast a Blinding Light at their feet. We'll come back to Blinding Light. Then Martial Law, you can see that Static Electricity is by far the winner here on this tier, which gives you more charges of Q to cast. Awesome. More damage, more usefulness, and it makes Fend shoot lightning bolts at everybody. Cool. We already know that Fend's her best thing, so just stacking a win on top of a win, really. Martial Law, the basic attack one, basic attacks against enemies that are stunned, slowed, or rooted, does 3% max health damage. Not doing so great. Also, would love to point out that Cassia herself now has very, very little way of actually providing the stun, root, or slow herself, which feels really bad. When you compare it to like Raynor, they actually specifically changed Raynor recently, didn't they? They specifically changed him to make it easier for himself to give himself his damage buff from talent against slowed, stunned, etc. Cassia doesn't have that, which is bizarre if you ask me. And then finally over here, Again, final touch on the basic attack thing. Level 20. Oh, what's this outstander? What's this outlier? Titan's Revenge. Her basic attacks ignore armor while avoidance is fully charged, and they deal additional 20% bonus damage. Needless to say, I think when you look at the basic attack things and you go, they're doing terribly on all of their talent tiers, clearly her basic attacks aren't very good at all. So I thought it was good to look at those talents because, well, it gives you an insight into some of what's going wrong with the hero. After all, talents are a huge part of how a hero's kit functions. Now, I will say with Cassia, with her win rate being that low overall, and with her basic attack build, which is really just building around her basic functionality, the core kit functionality being so poorly performing, I think it's very safe to say that, okay, the win rate sucks. Clearly, she was over-nerfed in her base stats. The basic damage on her spells could and should go up. Certainly her basic attack damage should go up. Her basic health, maybe her basic attack speed, basic cast speeds, all that sort of stuff, you know, those fundamental tuning knobs. I think nearly all of them could take a little tweak to the positive side for poor old Cassia, and that would just help her win rate across the board. That's the most important thing here to do, first of all, is, well, her win rate just generally sucks, so let's just boost the things that will boost all of her win rates, regardless of what talent she takes. You can also see that there is the problem with the basic attack build. Basic attacks clearly need more love than the rest of it. They're by far the worst talents, generally speaking, on their particular tiers, vastly outshone by her Impale, her thrusting talent. Oh boy, the fend, that's what it's called, fend. The fend talents are way better. They stand out as being much better. So yeah, I think certainly focusing a bit of extra love into that would be a good idea. I think there's also a couple of big design problems though. Even if we have those things happen, there's a couple of big design issues with the Cassia basic kit that I think are going to persist even if you buff the crap out of her. There's still going to be some issues there. Number one, this is one that again to me is very bizarre, much like adding Raynor ability to self-proc damage against CC targets on basic attacks, and then creating the same thing for Cassia but not giving her that. Bizarre, if you ask me, just bizarre. The other bizarre thing is that the purpose of this rework was to make her a non-niche hero, a hero that can function in multiple circumstances. And part of what they did to achieve this was to change avoidance. I'll be coming back to avoidance. I know you want me to talk about that, guys. But they changed avoidance to just generic armor because, oh, the physical armor, that's too much about countering physical-based teams, and we got to change that because we want Cassia to be generally useful. And then they keep blinding light in there, which is about blinding people. Very strange for me. Very strange. I just don't get it. And I really don't also like the interaction between blinding heroes and then doing bonus damage to blinding heroes. That was one of the problem talents. 33% win rate talent serves him on tier 7. That increases the bonus damage you do to blinded targets from 20 to 30%, and it also gives you cooldown reduction on blinding light with basic attacks. Terrible talent, terrible win rate. What's the problem? I mean, it's just bizarre that that's still part of her talent kit, because it's a talent that gets worse, right? Those sort of things worked before because, well, she was super niche, so you were always picking Cassia against basic attack centered teams. That was her whole jam. That was her whole deal. So it didn't feel too bad to have that sort of synergy in her kit. Well, you're already there to provide blinds and to be tanky with physical armor against these basic attackers. So you're just going to naturally be blinding them. And then, hey, congratulations, you get a whole lot of bonus damage against these heroes once you have actually made them vulnerable. You know, like Butcher charges in, you slap him with the blind. Awesome, great job, Cassia. Guess what? Bit of bonus damage against him now. Hey, go for it. It's just really weird to still have a blind in her kit though, because that takes some power out. You know, it's not like, again, imagine you take Raynor but you add a blind to all of his abilities. You know, he's gonna get weaker. You have to take stuff away to allow him to have that blind. It's the same thing with Cassia. Some of her power has gone into the blind. So, but why though? That's kind of the question. But why though? Having a blind fundamentally makes you an anti-basic attacker. That's what it does. That's definitively what a blind is about. So her having that in the base kit makes her still definitively an anti-basic attack hero. That's what she is. You're not going to take her in those non-niche circumstances. So I really thought that they would have touched that in some of the rework. The other obviously terrible talent that ties into this is level 16, 36% win rate Power Strike. Has the cool effect of making Lightning Fury pierce. That's kind of nice. Not as good as it used to be, of course, because you don't get the cooldown reduction on her Lightning Fury anymore. And the extra charges of Lightning Fury are in a different talent on that tier, a much better talent on that tier entirely in Static Electricity. Like the piercing through targets and splitting on heroes with Lightning Fury. This talent now, Power Strike, is now kind of a trap talent. As a Q build, you're better off just taking the extra charges. But marking heroes for 15 seconds, hitting 3 marks, removes them and casts Blinding Light at their feet. Like, what is that about? So bizarre. I just thought that's just weird. It's just weird. Number one, is really difficult to trigger those 3 marks. So it's just, you can have these random blinds going off, and like, who cares if you blind Jaina? Like, oh, thank God, Deckard Cain is not going to hit us with his staff anymore. We're saved. Thank you, Cassia, with your random 3 stacks of blind exploding. Really weird, really bizarre. So I really think that some of those blind talents and just having the blind in her kit at all is, for me, a big design question mark. And one of the big things I touch in the rework. The other big thing, of course, not to avoid the elephant in the room, is avoidance. It's avoidance. This is probably the worst part. I think that her being underpowered makes this feel even worse, right? Avoidance is so punishing. It takes so long, 3 seconds to build it up. And then if you're stood still for even a fraction of a second, you know, just, I think it's 0.6 of a second, like 0.6 seconds, that drops and it's just gone. Just from 30 armor to 0. In 0.6 seconds of standing still. You want to get that armor back, better run around in that team fight for 3 seconds. Stutter stepping is stressful. Casting abilities, the ability animations become a source of stress. It all just becomes stressful. And again, this is where the low win rate comes into it, because you know you're playing a hero that's just bad. In order for you to have a chance to win, you need to get every tiny little bit of value you can out of her kit. So it makes it extra stressful, because you know, well, if you drop your avoidance for even a millisecond, well, you're kind of screwed, because you're just putting yourself at an even bigger disadvantage, and it's going to take you 3 seconds to get it back, and it just feels awful. It just really feels bad. So I would like to see some pretty substantial changes to avoidance. A lot of suggestions, which I think make a lot of sense, to bring it more in line with Lucio. In terms of, oh, sorry if you can hear my dog barking at cats out there. But yeah, like, have it fall off more slowly, you know, have it just drop gradually even. That would work pretty well too. There's lots of things they could do with this. Right now though, it just doesn't feel good. It felt okay when it was a basic attack thing, and it would drop quickly, but it would come back at full power instantly as soon as you were moving. That felt all right. And you know, you felt like you could work around it, but the whole building up and then dropping mega quickly, no, it's just not good. And there you go. That's kind of my thoughts on the Cassia rework. I didn't touch on some stuff. I do think that you've got talents like Charge Strikes and Ring of the Leech, which just feel much worse than they did before, so I'm not happy about that. But in general, obviously, baseline buffs very much needed across the board. Big question mark in terms of the blind talents. Definitely extra large buffs needed for her basic attack, and that whole aspect of her kit, it feels really weak. And then just generally speaking, avoidance definitely seems way too punitive, does not feel good to play with. And yeah, I would also consider some of the other changes to some of the talents that existed before to just be less interesting and less fun and less satisfying versions of what existed before. So Cassia rework, is it any good though? No, it's not, but hopefully it will improve. We'll see. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye bye.